We join our discovery call already in progress.
Well, Dylan, you have really just taken a fascinating path with this business. You started your medical device company 10 years ago out of your garage, and now you're already at 32 employees.
That's right. We're super proud of what we've done in a short while, and we're really not slowing down at all. In fact, we plan on growing our revenue over the next 2 years. It's a little frustrating, though, because it feels like my current expenses are outpacing those revenue growths.
Your expenses are going up? How so?
Well, for example, right before this meeting, I opened up my latest medical renewal, and once again, the prices are out of control. It's infuriating how these darn insurance companies can just keep raising the rates on you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
How much did it go up?
15%, and that's on top of a big renewal from last year. I don't know how they expect a small business owner like me to shoulder that cost. And if I don't, I have to pass it along to my employees, and that's not right either.
Right. So do you mind me asking how much your current monthly medical bill is on a 15% increase?
$25,000, and that doesn't even include this latest increase, for crying out loud.
Wow. Well, listen, the great news is Insperity has a really unique way that we run our medical program. I think we're going to be able to bring you a comprehensive benefits plan for your employees and really mitigate those increases going forward. What do you say we put together some information and start working on a proposal?
I'm excited to learn more. Sounds great. Thank you.
Awesome.
End scene.
End scene, right? All right. How many of you would love to meet a business owner like that? Right? That was a pretty good call. What did you hear that you liked? What did he say? Okay, he had emotion in there. What else did you hear that you liked? What would have made you excited about being in that call? He has a problem. What's his problem? Big increase in medical benefits, right? 15% on a $25,000 medical bill all day long, right? If I could just meet with that guy 5 days a week, I'd be a superstar here. But what did I miss? And where could I have taken that call instead to take my discovery call to an entirely different level? He does care about his people. That's true. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, you guys are getting ahead of me. I'm Sarah Grimstead. I am the Regional Vice President out of the West.
And I'm Dylan Glad. I'm the Manager of Sales Performance Improvement.
Right. And over the next 40 minutes, we want to talk about just that, how we can talk differently by focusing on emotion so that we can have more successful and more effective discovery calls. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've often said that if I can get a business owner to cuss or cry in my discovery call, I know I have a deal in there. But that's really just a funny way of saying that if I can get a business owner to express emotion and really feel the pain of his or her problems, I've got a better opportunity of closing that business. So let's just get the elephant in the room out of the way right here in the beginning. We are not suggesting that you cuss or cry in your discovery calls.
I appreciate that. I'm not even sure it's in the curriculum, and that's going to get me an email.
Right,
anyway,
yeah.
so,
SPI will get in trouble. So, all right, Dylan, let's go ahead and get started.
Well, do you see the differences between how newer BPAs and more tenured BPAs conduct their discovery calls?
I do. So when I do debriefs with BPAs, when I'm talking to a newer BPA, I tend to hear stuff. Right? I hear, oh, they really like the idea of our training and development program, or they had a high increase in benefits, or they really need this or that. And when I'm talking to a tier 3 or 4 BPA, someone who's been around a while, my typical debrief, I'm listening to them talking about the struggles of the business owner and how they're focused on this, or how they're frustrated by that, or how they're really in pain to fix this or that. It's a very different type of conversation when I'm listening to a debrief from someone who has been here a while and has had a lot more experience.
So why is that a bad thing? Isn't it good that we identify things that need fixing?
It is. And listen, you're still going to find those needs and pain points and so forth as it relates to the stuff that we do. But here's a fact. Most business owners buy on emotion and justify the cost later. We always try to think about it like in dollars and cents, but the reality is it's not limited to Insperity. With any big purchase that we make, we focus on emotion and then justify it later. How many of us are homeowners in the room? Anybody walk into your dream house, fall in love, and then justify the payment?
It's a lot of house.
Right? but it's in a great school district and I know it's going to appreciate in value. I should do this. It's an investment, right? And so we do that. We fall in love with things first. We buy on emotion and then we justify the cost. We do it. That's why the car salesman always makes sure on the test drive that they drive you past that mirrored office building so you get a look at yourself, right?
It's a lot of
They do that
badge.
before they tell you the price. And so imagine, instead of walking into your dream house and falling in love, the real estate agent simply gave you a spreadsheet full of data, square footage, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, school district, and price. Would we ever fall in love? Would we ever justify that investment, that expense, that cost? No. So remember that. You've got to identify the emotion in the sales process to get that business owner to fall in love with the idea of fixing his business, to fall in love with the idea of what can be, to fall in love with the idea that he doesn't have to be as frustrated and angry and annoyed and whatever the right word is for him when he walks into his business every day because things aren't the way that he always imagined that they would be.
Okay, so why do you feel like it is that newer BPAs have a difficult time latching on to those emotional responses?
Yeah, well, in my opinion, it's a couple of things. One is sometimes emotion makes us uncomfortable, right? Especially if it's not excited emotion, but it's, frustrated emotion. And so we have to be careful not to shy away from that. But specifically around newer BPAs, what I find is that when you're newer and you're still trying to figure this thing out yourself and you're still nervous and you're going into that discovery call, your mind is on what you're supposed to be doing, right? You're thinking about your agenda or what's my next question gonna be, instead of actively listening to what the business owner is saying and actively listening for those emotional words. And I'll kind of give you an example of what I mean. So if after tonight, after the awesome Three-Eye Blind concert that we're all going to, your best friend called you and said, oh, I just had to call you in, Ben. I literally had the worst day at work today.
What happened?
You would ask a question, right? You would respond to what he or she said. And they would say, my boss, he's such a jerk.
Yes, he is. Sorry, what did they do?
This is a hypothetical
Yes.
situation. And then I would say, oh, this or that or the other thing, right? But when your best friend is talking to you, you're not thinking, oh my gosh, she's winding down. I'm gonna have to say something else. What am I gonna say? You're what? You're listening to what your friend is telling you, and then you're either asking a question to better understand something, you're asking a question to understand more deeply, and ultimately you might offer some suggestions. Why are our discovery calls any different than that? They shouldn't be. We need to listen, actively listen to what the business owner is saying, and then respond when they're done. And so it's okay to have a pause. It's okay to not have that next question lined up on your sheet. But if it's more conversational, you're gonna build that trust, and you're gonna really be able to recognize those words. Now here's the other risk of not actively listening. When we're thinking about the next thing that we're going to say, our brain has already switched to that, and we're not hearing everything that the business owner is telling us. Worse yet, when you are ready to say something, when you're geared up with your next question, can't we, as the person talking, sense that? We've all been talking to someone, probably just on the last break, where they want to say something and you recognize that, so you start to just wind down what you're saying to give them a chance to talk. We don't want that business owner to stop talking. Not right now. We want him or her to tell us everything. So when we're ready to talk and we're indicating that non-verbally, we're going to miss probably a great nugget that's about to come from them, a great pain point, perhaps an emotional word. So my encouragement to you is actively listen. Don't worry so much about what your next thing you're saying is, so that you can be in the moment. And I think that your next probing questions will be much more tied to what they're saying rather than just following a path or an agenda.
Okay, so we're having a good conversation. We've heard some good emotional words. How do we latch on to those? How do we dig into those emotional pieces?
All right, so some of you may not be doing this already, right? And so the idea sounds good, but I don't quite know how to do it. Here's the easiest one in the world, is just when you hear that emotional word, give it back to them with a question mark at the end. So I think one of the things that Dylan said in our role play was something was frustrating. So I could have simply responded, frustrating? Or, if you want to juice it up a little bit, frustrating? How so? The business owner is going to give you more detail, more information on that emotion. He's going to describe it in more detail simply by a one-word question, giving it back to him. Now, Here's another one, right? Whether you've been to counseling or whether you've simply seen it on TV, what's a favorite phrase that counselors like to use? Tell me more. Or yes, there you go. How does that make you feel, right? How do you feel about that? Asking that question requires an emotional response. You can't ask someone how they feel and not get an emotion back. So there's a lot of things that you can do to drive the conversation in an emotional way.
Okay, well, we're driving the conversation, and I've also heard you use a term, leading the witness. Tell me a little bit more about that.
All right, so we had a pretty much of a lay-down discovery call here over, right, didn't we? I mean, I wrote it, had to make it easy. But they're not all that easy, and a lot of times, especially if you're newer and you're not meeting the prospect through a referral or some other warm source, you're literally meeting them for the first time. They don't know you, and they're not gonna start blubbering about all kinds of stuff. And so sometimes you have to interject emotion into the conversation. And so one of the ways you can do that is simply ask an assumptive question. So maybe Dylan is telling me in a very non-emotional way that he got a big medical increase. I'm gonna lead him to an emotion by saying, gosh, that sounds really frustrating. Or gosh, that sounds really infuriating, is it? And then he's either gonna say, yeah, it is frustrating. Or he's gonna say, no, I wouldn't call that frustrating, which then you can go back to idea number 2. Well, how does it make you feel? Now, sometimes he's gonna say, honestly, it's just a cost of doing business. That's a swing and a miss, you guys. This is not gonna work 100% of the time. But giving yourself a chance to bring this to the emotional level is going to absolutely help you to have more effective discovery calls and future meetings.
So I've got a business owner, and they're not giving me much, and it's almost a losing proposition. How have you used these techniques to turn maybe a bad situation into a winning one?
Yeah, okay, I have a story for you guys. So a few years ago, I was on a discovery call working with a BPA in LA. And it was a good opportunity. It was a 90-person deal, 90-person company, and they had a medical plan that was the pits. Like, we did not have a medical plan weak enough to compete with the benefits that they had in place. And understandably, our benefits were gonna be more expensive than theirs because our plan was richer. And so 90-person company, but they had really low medical participation because the plan was so stinky. And so their medical bill was about 10 grand a month. And so I look at this thing, and in dollars and cents, it's not gonna work, right? I mean, we all understand that a 90-person company, there's a pretty significant admin cost there. And so to add on additional medical cost too, that was just, it's not gonna be a winning proposition. So I decided I can't sell this thing logically. I have to bring emotion into the deal. And so after explaining to the business owner how bad his plan was, I said, let me ask you this. I said, how do your employees feel, emotion, right? How do your employees feel about this medical offering that you've put together? And the business owner goes, I said, so let me just make sure I understand. You're spending $120,000 a year to make your employees feel, And he let out this big sigh, and he sat back in the chair, and he goes, you know, I never really thought about it that way. Well, that was my 1 punch. Then I gave him my 2 punch. And then I said, okay, well, I would think if you're gonna spend $120,000 on your employees, you'd want them to feel, yay! And so we sold the deal. They bought the medical with it. They paid more for the medical because it was no longer about the cost. It was about, he was mad that he never even realized that he's spending 6 figures a year to basically disappoint his employees, right? And so that's a great example, I think. I just complimented myself. I will let you decide if it's a great example. It is an example of using emotion rather than logic to take the business owner's mind to a different place, to lead him to where you want him to be. He clearly cared about his employees. He just hadn't put 2 and 2 together to realize that what he was doing wasn't matching how he was feeling.
Okay, so now we're having this conversation, and it's actually working.
Yes.
And their eyes may start to well up, but what do you do if someone actually starts crying? Do you go with it, lean into it, or do you change the subject?
Yeah, okay, so listen, nobody's gonna like start ugly crying in the meeting with you. It doesn't happen. But you will have someone who gets to that level of frustration where they may get a little glassy-eyed. You can tell that they're starting to get emotional. Do not let up. This is what you have been working towards. Yes. But you do have to be obviously professional and empathetic. So in my position, I will give them a moment, right? I'll be empathetic and let them know. I can tell that this is bothering you. I can tell that this is a really sensitive subject, but then I'm keeping on digging in because that's what you want. Listen, here's the reality. You are going to lose more deals to the status quo than to any competition out there. You're going to lose more deals to doing nothing than doing something. If the alternative of doing nothing is not as painful as the change of doing something, you're going to lose that deal every time. So if you don't help the business owner recognize that the pain of doing nothing is horrible, he or she is never going to do the pain of change. Right? So that's really what this is all about. Shining a light and helping them recognize that doing nothing is no longer an option.
Okay, well, crying is one thing.
Yes.
But what if the business owner starts using, profanity? What do I do there?
Yeah. Okay. So that one's a little bit more of a gray area. Did you like all the F-bombs to start with, by the way? Very anti-Sarah. So sometimes business owners, sometimes people use profanities as adjectives, right? It's not really emotion, it's just a way that they talk. I'm letting that go in one ear and out the other. Obviously, you're not going to get anywhere with that. But if a business owner does use a profanity in a way to express a real emotion, I am going to latch on to that. Now, I'm a huge note taker in my meetings, and most of my notes are simply quotes of what the business owner said. And the more emotional he is, the more quotes I'm writing down of what he said. So I may acknowledge the profanity in the moment, or here's another thing that I really like to do, is bring it back in my next call. So let's just say in a discovery call that you've gotten to all this pain, all this emotion. Yes, he absolutely wants to move forward in the process. He wants to look at this. I can't keep doing things the way I'm doing it. And then a week goes by before you have your second call. Guess what? He's not emotional anymore, right? A week's gone by, a million problems have come and gone, a million things have happened, and he's sitting back down with you, and he's just as cold and unemotional as he was the first time you were talking. And so you don't want to spend another whole 20 minutes getting him back to an emotional state, right? You want to get right back into it. So I love to start my second calls out with a quote of emotion from the first call. So for example, it might sound something like this. Hey, so Dylan, last time we were together, I was kind of reviewing my notes, and you said something that really stood out for me. We were talking about your turnover problem, and you were saying how, hold on, I want to make sure I get this right, how fucking ridiculous it is that blah, 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 right? So I'm not cussing back to them, but I'm using that to quote. Why is it so important to use his or her words? Because that's the way that they talk. They're going to be right back into that moment, and they're going to be just as upset then, as they were the first time. And now, my second call, I've gone from 0 to 60 in my first 30 seconds. So I can be right back into it, and I can have a more effective second call by bringing them back into the emotion of the first.
That's good shit. What are some other ways business owners show emotions that you've seen?
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about verbal emotions, but quite frankly, that's only a small portion of it. The vast majority of emotion comes out non-verbally, which is why listening is more than just your ears, right? Listening, you gotta watch with your eyes, you gotta look for that body language. Non-verbal emotion might come out in a look of discomfort on their face, right? Or shifting in their seat, or like I said, that business owner with the medical bill, that heavy sigh that came out, right? All of these things are non-verbal emotions coming out, and it's really important that you recognize those, and then you can call attention to it. It seems like this is making you a little uncomfortable. Is it? Right? And that's, again, going to get back into emotion and kind of acknowledging that.
So most business owners really don't even understand their own emotions. How do you point that out to them or use their own emotions so they understand it?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. So a million years ago, when I was district manager, we used to do an exercise on listening for emotional words in our sales meetings, right? We would role play. And so in these role plays that we would do, I would be the business owner. One of the BPAs would, role play it with me. And I'd have everybody else in the room writing down the emotional words that they heard so we could learn how to recognize them. And so, so when I was going to play the part of the business owner, I would think back to a discovery call I'd gone on the week before, and I would really sort of play that part, channel that business owner, think about what happened, and then I would just go and do the role play. And here's what was fascinating me, I didn't realize it until this happened, is the rest of the room would hear emotional words that I said that I did not realize that I said. I was just getting in the mindset of the business owner, kind of playing the part. And I was like, oh, I didn't even realize I said that. I was just in the motion. And so that taught me that a lot of times business owners, when they're talking to you, may not even realize that they've given you an emotional response or an emotional word. And the risk is, if you're not listening for them and recognizing them, then it's like they never happened. And again, I'm going to say it again because it's really important. Absent emotion, absent pain, all you're left with is a dollars and cents transaction of, do you want these services for this price? And we've heard it a million times, right? Oh, I'm spreadsheeting you with these other PEOs, or oh, it really looks like you guys all do the same thing. If we don't separate ourselves by having these conversations about the pain and the emotion in the deal, then we're simply left to be spreadsheeted.
All right, well, that's one side of the coin, the business owner. But we're having a conversation, so that's two people. What about the BPA emotions? What's going on there?
Okay, you guys. First of all, I know one thing about everybody in this room. We are all super optimistic people, right? We start this job because we're optimistic, and then we go to training, we learn all this great stuff about how awesome our service is, and we are over the top excited to tell anybody and everybody about Insperity and how we can help them and all of that. And here's where we hurt ourselves, is that we can't temper that emotion, and so we get into a discovery call, and as soon as somebody bites on something that we do, we throw up all over them all this great stuff that Insperity can help them with. Now here's the problem. In a discovery call, everything goes in certain phases. You have your conversation phase where you're going to learn about the business, but the reality is once you start talking about Insperity, you've shifted this thing into a sales call. Now you're just giving your pitch about all this great stuff that we do. No more conversation is going to happen. The business owner goes into sales mode, right, where I'm being sold to, and they start evaluating you like that. And so the best advice I can give you as it relates to this is, as much emotion as you want to draw out from the business owner, you have to really show a self-discipline to keep yours in check. You cannot start just talking about Insperity. It's probably the biggest thing that newer BPAs do to sabotage their deals, is they jump way too soon into our stuff. They talk way too much in the discovery call instead of listening. And you're going to come back from about 1,000 fantastic discovery calls that go absolutely nowhere. And you can't figure out why. And it's because only one person in the room thought that call was fantastic, and it was you. So you have to really make sure that you are listening to what the prospect is saying. When I was a DM, one of my favorite debrief questions, I asked it every single time someone came back, when they got overly excited about a meeting, is I would say, what did the prospect say? What did the prospect say about, no, what were his words? Right? Because when we put the prospect's words through our own little internal translator in our brain, they spit out much more positive, much more optimistic, much more fleshed out than anything that the prospect actually told us, because we didn't dig deep enough to ask all those questions and hear it from him or her first.
Okay, so when you were a BPA,
yes,
how did you know that you have enough to talk about before you transitioned and started talking about us?
Okay, so first I was a BPA. I did sell this, and this was one of the biggest struggles that I had, because as you can tell, I'm a pretty upbeat, optimistic person too, and I love this company and I love what we do, and I wanted to tell everybody. And so when I was new, I was good for about 12 minutes. 12 minutes of conversation, and then there would inevitably be kind of this uncomfortable lull, uncomfortable for me. I didn't like the silence. I didn't know what else to say, and so I would bring out my best friend, which is called the Discovery Call Brochure, and I would flip that sucker open, and I would explain it to, to the end. And I went out with a BPA one time, and he said, you got to stop doing that. Like, you are literally destroying every opportunity that you're on. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, you are killing these deals. He said, you know what? The next discovery call we go on, you're forbidden to bring the discovery call brochure. I lost my mind. I was like, I can't do that. I can't. It's my security blanket. I can't go into a call. You have to have literature. And he's like, okay. He's like, you can bring the brochure, but you can't pull it out until you're standing up to leave. It can only be a leave behind. I'm like, oh, okay. So we go on our next call. And we're 12 minutes in, you know. I got nothing. And I'm looking down. It's right there in my bag, you know. Then I look over at him, and he's like, and so I pushed through.
Do it.
Right?
Don't you do it.
Yeah, right. And so I pushed through, and I thought about what the business owner had said to me, and I pivoted, and I asked another question. And you know what? We went another 30 minutes and had a fantastic conversation, and I challenged him on some stuff. But what it did is it showed me I could do that. I could get comfortable being uncomfortable, and it could make me grow and get a little bit better. And so I would say we're probably all doing things that are unintentionally sabotaging us in our deals. I feel very fortunate that he was with me and pointed that out. So with that, I came up with a system. In fact, I believe I was taught it back in L1.
Could be.
I'll go ahead and give you guys credit because I can't remember. And so here was my system. Now, you have something that works for you, but this is what worked for me to really kind of give myself self-discipline, is when I was in a discovery call, and once I identified a challenge or a problem, and I had done two things. I had dug into it enough to understand that it was truly a problem in their business, and I could really talk about why it was a problem and a pain point. And I understood it well enough and had heard enough quotes from him that I could justify to my district manager why that was a particular problem. That got a star in my notes. But I was not allowed to talk about Insperity until I had 3 stars. So just because I had this great one that I was so excited about and knew was a problem, I still wasn't allowed to talk about Insperity. Because here's the deal. If you have one problem in a business, is that strong enough to go through all the documents that you need for the business profile and all the stuff I'm going to ask for? But probably not. That's a pain, right? What about 2 problems in a business? All right, now we're getting somewhere. But if I can get 3 problems that business owner is feeling, understand the impact to him and to the business in it, be able to tell my district manager why it's a problem using his or her own words, I know I'm getting a business profile from him. In fact, just sitting there in the meeting before I even open my mouth about it, I have so much confidence that I am walking out of that thing with a business profile. That internal self-confidence is invaluable. Right? For those of you that heard Kenny Randall talk, he talked about being an athlete and the confidence that takes. Every time Kenny walked on the field, he knew that he was going to be successful. That's in professional athletes' mind. It's a huge part of what they do. Our role should not be any different, right? And that is that we have to be so confident about what we're doing that it comes through and we can visualize it and make it happen. And so for me, knowing that I had 3 stars in my notes gave me so much confidence that we were the best thing for this business owner. I could give him hope, I could tell him why, and we were off to the races. And I will tell you, this method that I'm talking about turned into more than a 70% discovery call to business profile collection rate, meaning every 10 discovery calls I went into, more than 7 of them I walked out with a business profile, and it resulted in a lot of closed deals. So you can steal that method from me or come up with something on your own, but I encourage you to find that self-discipline and do not sabotage yourself by talking too soon in the discovery call.
I like the idea about practicing hard so the play is easy. What do you say we practice this role play again and demonstrate some of these techniques you've been talking about?
All right. Okay, but I'm going to give you guys a little assignment as well this time. So as Dylan and I are talking, if you hear him say any emotional words, jot those down, and we'll do a quick debrief at the end to see how many of them you guys can hear. And bonus points if you hear me using any of the techniques that I've already talked about today. Okay? All right, here we go. I just turned 2 new pads. I can take some more notes. Are you laughing at me?
Action.
So, Dylan, you've really taken a fascinating path with your business, starting in your garage 10 years ago, and now you're already at 32 employees.
Thank you, Sarah. We're really proud of what we've accomplished so far, and we're not really slowing down at all. In fact, we plan on growing our revenue over the next 2 years. But it's just a little frustrating right now because it feels like my expenses are outpacing that revenue growth.
Frustrating. How so?
Well, for example, right before this meeting, I opened up my latest benefits renewal, and once again, the costs are out of control. It's so darn infuriating how these insurance companies can keep raising the rates on you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
That does sound infuriating. And I want to learn more about the medical piece, but I want to go back to something else that you said because it's really interesting. You said you're going to grow your revenues over the next 2 years. Tell me, what's driving that growth?
Well, I should clarify that. COVID has been a game changer for the business. The problem is we're running a really flat organization right now. I've got to hire and train and manage the entire thing. I'm really losing my mind. I'm working 14 to 16 hours a day, and I feel like I'm just spinning my wheels.
16 hours a day? I mean, you must be exhausted. How long has this been going on?
Exhausted is right. Up until about 6 months ago, we were just 8 people. We've made significant product enhancements to our design, and the client needs are off the chart. We've hired 25 people in the last 6 months, and I'm still running the company like we did when we were smaller.
Wow. I can only imagine what you're missing out on at home working so many hours.
Well, the truth is I leave for work before the kids get up, and most of the time, they're fast asleep when I get home. I know it's not going to last forever, but right now, it sure feels like it is.
Yeah, that is so tough. I mean, let me ask you, have you guys been able to put any additional structure in place to help you sort of balance that out?
With what time? I'm seriously losing my mind trying to figure out where I could even start.
Yeah.
I don't even have the time to think about what that might take.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, this meeting alone is probably causing you stress that we're taking time to do it. But I'll tell you what, here is the good news, Dylan, is that we have helped a lot of companies with exactly this type of thing, managing that heavy growth and kind of evening it out to give them some structure to help. I would love to dig into this some more. Is that okay?
That sounds great. I could use the help.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Role play number 2.
End scene.
So tell me, did anybody hear an emotional word or two? Okay, give me an idea. I saw your hand go first. Yes, sure.
Oh, infuriating?
Infuriating. Yes, he's absolutely infuriating. How about somebody else? Yes. Exhausted. I would be too. 16 hours a day.
You suggested exhausted. Dylan didn't bring up exhausted. You gave him the
I did.
emotion for him to bring.
Maybe that was a technique, right?
Good job. Good job.
Good. Good. How about somebody else? Anything else you heard him say? Proud? Uh-huh. Good. Jamie?
Oh, he stole mine.
Oh, oh, I'm sorry.
You used the word darn. Yes, that is frustrating. Darn frustrating.
Darn, he said damn last meeting, so things must be getting better.
It's HR.
But yeah, that's definitely using that to punctuate in an emotional way rather than just a potty mouth sort of way. Sort of rated G potty mouth, I guess. Yeah. All right, so you guys heard some, oh yes.
Not so much a word, but his tone changed a couple of times.
Did you see it? You saw, good. You saw that nonverbal emotion. He's quite the actor, right? You could see when I brought up, how are things at home? He didn't talk about home, but I sat there and put 2 and 2 together. Well, if you're 16 hours a year and you're sleeping 6 hours a night, that doesn't leave a lot of time at home. And so how did that do it, right? That's when he started to get a little emotional because he realized, yeah, I'm away from my kids. This really stinks, right? So that was a little bit of leading the witness kind of that we talked about. I didn't really need to because he was already emotional, but I wanted to take it right to that next level. All right, so those are some of the words, and there's probably more out there. But do you see, like, once you pay attention to it, how much more you hear it? It's kind of like, have you ever been thinking about buying a new car, and you think, you know what, I think this is the car I want. And then all of a sudden, when you're driving on the freeway, you see that car everywhere, right? Like,
In the color you want.
Yeah, it's not like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden everybody went out and bought that car. It's just being aware of something makes you recognize it more. So I think that just talking about this emotion and recognizing those emotional words, you're gonna find them so much more often in your discovery calls and your prospect calls from here forward. And you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, they were there the entire time. So yeah.
Well, we've talked about some great stuff today, and we really want to hear what your 3 takeaways would be from all of this if we were going to try to apply it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys have been in a lot of breakouts, a lot of training this week, so I try to just kind of summarize it here for you. So if you didn't catch anything else, these are kind of the top 3 that I hope that you'll take away. The first one is remember to isolate those emotional responses. Give them the emotional word back with a question mark, or even just simply how so will allow them to elaborate more on what you were or what they were thinking. The second one is to remember, dig deeper, peel back those entry-level wants and maybe surface-level needs that you were satisfied with before, and really dig deeper to find that emotional pain. Look, if you're in your kitchen and you're peeling back an actual onion, it's going to make you tear up and cry, right? So if you're doing this right in your calls and you're peeling back, you should always get to some sort of an emotional core. And then finally, don't sabotage yourself. Table a need. Make sure that you find those 3 areas of pain for them before you move on to Insperity. Don't fall for the bait by jumping into your Insperity sales pitch, no matter how optimistic and excited you are. Don't do it before it's time, or you'll end up just being pigeonholed as a salesperson, and you'll lose all the value that you could have found in that call.
Well, I know some people in the audience have some thoughts and some questions. We've got about 7 minutes left if you want to take a couple.
All right, I hope so. Anybody have a question that I can answer for you? Oh, yes. Oh, wait, hang on a second. The microphone's coming. We do have our remote folks attending today's session, so we want to make sure that we capture all the audio for them.
Thank you. This is a great session, but it seems to me it's been entirely focused on a face-to-face discovery call. Can you comment on the impact of a virtual Zoom-related discovery call might have on this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will tell you this. If you would have asked me that question 20 months ago, I would have said, yeah, I think this is way harder via Zoom. But here's what's interesting. 20 months ago, when we first started doing, virtual meetings, do you remember those? We tried to super dressed up. Is our background perfect? I want it to appear like I'm still in the office, right? We had to be super professional. I remember we did some Zoom, and Ross was on it, right? Some Zoom in my region, and somebody had their dog on their lap. And after the call, he was like, who had their dog on their lap? And I was like, I think it was a service person. And so, but now we fast forward, and Steve put up the video or the screenshot of all the service folks, right? The screenshots. And we saw what? We saw dogs, we saw baby Yodas, we saw baby Groots, we saw everything, right? We're so much more comfortable in virtual meetings now that I would actually argue that getting to this emotion and making that connection is easier with folks via Zoom, because most of them, they're letting us in their homes. We're letting them in our homes. And so it's just about being aware of it. In the beginning, you were like, oh my God, don't let the dog bark in the background. And now if somebody's dog barks, you're like, oh, what kind of dog do you have? Hold it up so I can see, right? And so I think it's just about embracing that and making sure. The biggest thing that you can do, right, if you haven't gotten this already, I don't want you to be perceived as a salesperson. If you're perceived as a salesperson, you are going to get nowhere. But if you're truly perceived as a friend, as an advisor, as a confidant, as someone that can help them, not sell them something, they're going to allow themselves to become more vulnerable, and they're going to give you these nuggets that you can capitalize on to help them see the need to make a change to Insperity. Yes, back here in the very back. I don't know where my microphone went. There we go.
Hi. Curious if there's a way to reverse engineer if things are going really well in the business. If you can use positive emotions like, hey, everything's going really well. What would make you really proud to see happen the next 12 months instead of if there's nothing really negative coming out of the conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, you, I'm afraid, have fallen for one of the biggest lies out there, which is nothing's wrong in my business today, right? Look, I used to be a district manager. I believed that I was a small business owner. I had 8 BPAs and a DA. I had a 9-person company. And I'm going to tell you, I was up morning, noon, and night stressing about my business. right? If I was number one in the country, I was like, how do I stay number one? If I wasn't number one, I was like, how do I get to number one? How do I keep my tier 4 who's been here for a decade motivated and excited and keeping on going? How do I help these tier 1s that I just hired find their own success? How do I help this guy who's been here 14 months and doesn't feel like he is where he should be? How do I keep him, focused and believing that he's about to hockey stick up to his own success? I thought about my problems in my business morning, noon, and night, whether I was number 1 in the company or whether I was number 80 in the company. I thought about my problems. And get this, I had Insperity. I didn't have to stress about making payroll. I didn't have to stress about my benefits renewal. I didn't have to stress about my compliance laws and what the crazy thing they were going to do in California. I didn't have to stress about whether I was going to get sued. I had Insperity, and I was up morning, noon, and night stressed about my business. Any business owner that tells you that they don't have problems in their business is not telling you the truth. Why? Because they don't trust you, right? We all lie to salespeople. You ever walk into a store specifically needing something and the salesperson says, hi, what can I help you find? And you're like,
I'm just looking.
Just looking. Every single one of us have done that, right? It's a natural reaction to salespeople. So when a business owner tells you he has no problems, it's because he doesn't trust you. I promise you, if you met that same guy Saturday afternoon in your next door neighbor's barbecue with a Budweiser in his hand and you said, how's business? He would answer you honestly. So the first thing to remember is, I'm going to get to your actual question, but I think that was a really important point. I'm so glad you asked it, is don't believe the business owner when he tells you there are no problems. Now, his problems may be future-based, right? And it could be something in a very positive way, absolutely. We don't always have to find pain, but if he wants to, for example, he's doubled his revenues over the last 2 years and he's hoping to double them again over the next 2 years, I'm going to say that's fantastic. What's driving all that growth? What are you super proud of? That's an awesome question. And then what do you think are your risks to keeping that from happening again? What are the potential roadblocks in your way? Let's talk future tense. What could happen? Finding the right people, right? Developing the new product. Who's going to do that for you? Supply chain stuff? You think Insperity doesn't help you with that? Who's going to manage that for you? Who's going to negotiate those relationships? How are you going to stay on top of that and still handle all the rest of this stuff in your business? Here's another truth. Every problem a business owner has directly or indirectly relates back to their people, which means Insperity can help with every single problem in a business. Hands down. Directly or indirectly, we can help with everything. We just need to understand it. But I never let a business owner, I never believe a business owner when they tell me that they don't have any problems. I take it on myself and I ask myself, what did I do? How did I present myself? What did I say that didn't allow the business owner to trust me? That's something I can fix, maybe not in this meeting because I'm already in it, but I'm going to fix it in my next meeting. I'm going to learn from that so that I can do better because I don't ever accept that answer as a truth. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Well, unfortunately, Sarah, we're out of time.
Are we
And we're the
already out of
only
time?
thing standing between everyone and lunch.
Oh gosh, well then I'm going to shut up. All right, so a couple of things. We do have our remote participants on the Zoom, and I just wanted to say thank you to them as well as all of you for participating in today's session. Nothing happens by ourselves, and so one of the participants remotely is Carl Tangness, who was instrumental in helping me to put together this presentation, so I want to say thank you to him. The other thing that doesn't happen by chance is a successful presentation, and so we started with some comedy. I think we're going to end with some comedy as well to show you some of the things that don't go right as you're putting together a presentation. You guys enjoy lunch and the rest of convention.
Action.
I went out of order. Could you ask the question to it?
Okay, well, we'll skip on forward then.
Sorry. Oh, there you go. That's a good start. Let's talk more about that, you know.
Oh, shit. You said just...
Dylan.
Did I say that out loud?
Yes.
I thought that. I'm sorry. I won't do that in the run-through. My internet's unstable? Give me a break.
You're back now.
Oh, good. Pick up where we left off. Do you remember where you were when I froze?
I just finished that competency. So Dylan, so we go back to our seats. I climb on the bar stool.
No bar. Comfy chairs.
Oh, they're just chairs? Oh, good.
Maybe. I won't get stools. There won't be stools. I don't like stools either.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. That's your one.
That's all right. We can go out. We've talked a lot about a lot of great stuff here today.